Hey everybody, and welcome to Kensington Online. My name is Patrick, and if you're in the Traverse City area, we just want to say Happy Cherry Festival Week to you. You're either fully engaging in it or you're running the other direction, but we're so glad that you are enjoying it. It's a big deal for us in Traverse City. It's one of the biggest things that we do all year. So for those of you in Northern Michigan, we hope you're having a good time with that. Today we are in the middle of a series called Learning to Fly. We're talking about forgiveness and ultimately how you can live your life in a way where you can feel weightless from some of the baggage that's kept you down. So we're super excited about today. And we have an amazing opener with one of my favorite worship leaders. The worship leader that we have here today, his name is Jalen Seawright. He's from our Troy campus in Metro Detroit. He and the team are going to be leading this opener. That's one of my favorites by a guy named Justin Timberlake, so you've probably heard it before. So we hope that you enjoy the opener today, and we hope that you enjoy our time. One last thing before we jump into the service, I want to let you know that if you're not currently following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, we would love for you to do that, and that's one of the best ways to find out more information about our church. Well, I think we're about to get started. We'll see you right back here in just a few minutes.
Everyone knows all about my direction, and in my heart somewhere I wanna go there, still I don't go there. Everybody say something, say something, say something, say something, say something, say something. I don't wanna get caught up in the rhythm of it, but I can't help myself. No, I can't help myself. No, no. Caught up in the middle of it. No, I can't help myself. No, I can't help myself. No, no, no. Caught up in the rhythm of it. Everyone knows all about my transgressions. Still in my heart somewhere there's melody and harmony for you and me tonight. Now here you call my name. Everybody say something, say something, say something, say something, say something, say something. I don't wanna get caught up in the rhythm of it, but I can't help myself. No, I can't help myself. No, no. Caught up in the middle of it. No, I can't help myself. No, I can't help myself. No, no, no. Caught up in the rhythm of it. Sometimes the greatest way to say something is to say nothing at all. Sometimes the greatest way to say something is to say nothing. If I can't help myself, if I can't help myself, no, no. Caught up in the middle of it. No, I can't help myself. No, I can't help myself. No, no. Caught up in the rhythm of it. Maybe I'm looking for something I can't. Maybe I'm looking for something I can't. Maybe I'm looking for something I can't. Maybe I'm looking for something I can't have. Sometimes the greatest way to say something is to say nothing at all. Sometimes the greatest way to say something is to say nothing.
Wow, let's give it up for the band again. That was so awesome. Awesome. Who loves Justin Timberlake? I know that I do. You know, I personally love that song because we often experience that inner dialogue of, do I reach out? Do I say something? Or maybe I hold back and I don't. And when it comes to forgiveness and our relationships with our friends and family, sometimes we do say something, but then we don't feel anything. And that's a little bit what we're talking about today. Well, hey guys, my name is Jessie and welcome to Kensington. We are so excited that you're spending your weekend with us. We exist to create a safe place for you to explore your faith. So it's our hope that as soon as you walk in these doors, you know that you're so welcome and that you're in the right place. And in fact, if this is your first or maybe your second or third time here and you're looking to find out more about who we are and to get connected, we have created an environment just for you called Starting Point. It's located out in the lobby under a freestanding orange banner. It's just a place where you can ask questions and we can help you get connected. Now, if maybe going up to a table after service isn't your kind of thing, or you got to grab the kids and go, we have created a virtual starting point at startingpoint.today. And it's the same thing. You can get your questions answered, and we'll reach out to you and make sure you get connected. All right, so I'd love for you to pull out your program. We have lots of exciting things happening around here this summer, and I want to highlight a couple. First of all, on August 5th, we have our summer baptism service. This is our biggest baptism service of the year, and we're going to be having one service that day at 10:30, and then directly following, we're going to have an outdoor party with a barbecue and live music and kid-friendly activities. It's going to be so much fun. So if you've been baptized, you know the powerful impact that has on your spiritual journey. And while witnessing baptisms is awesome, partaking in it is life-changing. So if you think this is the next step for you, I'd invite you to go to kensingtonchurch.org/baptism. There's an FAQ on there, and you get all the information you need about taking that step. All right, so also on July 27th and August 24th, we have our family movie nights, it's our third year doing this, and our heart behind these events is that it's a place where you can come with your family and friends. It's an irresistible outdoor fun environment. We can connect together and connect with God. We're going to have inflatables, pizza, popcorn, obviously a family-friendly movie. It's going to be so much fun. So you're not going to want to miss it, and you're going to want to invite everyone you know. So family, friends, colleagues, third cousin once removed, what have you. Make sure you get them here, and you get here on July 27th and August 24th. All right, so with all of that, I want to invite you guys to stand up, turn to your neighbors, and ask them, what summer movie are they excited to see in theaters? Thanks so much for being here.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick, and I just wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
Well, good morning, Kensington. How are you this morning? You doing good? Amen. Would you sing with us? We're alive in Him, amen?
World may hold me down. everybody. My name is Jalen Seawright. I'm the worship arts director down at our Kensington Troy campus. So it is just awesome to be here with you all. I was telling Patrick earlier, I just usually pass through Traverse City because I have some friends in Petoskey, but it's just awesome to be here. And I got to see like all the crowds for the Cherry Festival yesterday. I was coming to town. So it's just great to be here. So how many know that all God's promises are yes and amen? Right? One of those promises that God tells us is that he is faithful and he is just to forgive us for our sins. So let's rest in God's promises, amen? Can we do that? All right, let's sing this out. Whoa. Out of darkness, you have filled me with peace. Giver of mercy, you're my help in time. Lord, I can't help but sing faithful. All your promises, listening. Yeah, oh, yeah. All your promises. Sing beautiful, yeah. Beautiful Savior, you have brought me near. You pulled me from the ashes, broken every curse. Blessed Redeemer, you have set this captive free. Lord, I can't help but sing. Come on, every voice, sing faithful, faithful you are. That we can rest in God's promises. I know when life seems chaotic, the last thing we want to do is rest. But let's rest in his promises, all right? All right. So sing us out. So I will rest in your promises. My confidence not found in me, no, it's in your faithfulness. I will rest in your promises. My confidence, whoa, is your faithfulness. I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness. So I will rest in your promises. My confidence Give it up for Jesus.
Hey, real quick, didn't they sound amazing? Wasn't that so great? Give it up for Jalen. We're so glad he came up and hanging out with us this weekend. And this is your first time, I always like to say this, especially after a song like that, depending on what you believe about God or what you believe about faith, the idea that, God promises things, and not only that God promises things, but then he says yes to us, and he's that involved in our lives. For a lot of us in the room, that feels like something that we believe, but then there's some of us in the room, if we're really honest, that's one of those things we're going, I don't know. Like, I remember praying a prayer and it didn't feel like God answered it. Or for some of you, you came in the room and you're like, I've been praying a prayer for years and years and years. It doesn't feel like God even hears me, is even up there. And if you were really honest, and I love kind of saying this, is if you were really honest, you don't even know if he's even there, like if there's really even a God, or if there is a God, is he actually good and is he for you? And so what I want to tell you is the reason that we exist as a church is for people just like you, where you can come in and explore faith and ask those questions. And so if you were the person during that song who was skeptical the whole time, like I was at certain points in my life, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and for taking a step to explore your faith. So thanks so much for singing with us. You can go ahead and have a seat. For those of you who don't know, my name is Patrick. For those of you who are up here for Cherry Festival, do we have anybody that's traveled up here just to be a part of Cherry Festival? Where are you guys at? Anybody up here? Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. Or you're up here because it's finally hot. Winter ended last week. It's pretty great. So we're so glad that you decided to join us. Anyway, it's great. Real quick, do we have anybody from Metro Detroit in the area? You from down here? That's fantastic. So great. Welcome to Traverse City. This is not our normal weather, but we're glad you're here. Anyway, hey, we're so thankful that you're a part of this. Today, we're continuing our series called Learning to Fly, and we've been talking about what it looks like to live our lives with weightlessness, and what does it look like to not carry baggage. And so we're excited to wrap up that series today and to be a part of that. But before we jump into the message, I want to invite our ushers to move forward. We're going to receive our offering. And for those of you who are part of Kensington, we want to say thank you so much for you giving and sacrificially giving. There's a lot of different ways that you do that. And a lot of people give online. A lot of people give through our app. Those are kind of the easiest ways to do it. You can set up recurring giving that way. And then some of you give through the pouch as the pouch passes, which is always a great thing. So thank you so much for being a part of that. And then if you're not somebody who attends Kensington or you don't come regularly, we get asked the question, or I get asked the question, if I'm going to invite somebody, a lot of people think the church is just all about getting my money. And I'm like, I drive a 2006 Honda, so it's not for me if we're trying to do that. But that's a thing for us. How does that work? And does the church just want my money? And so what I would tell you, if you're a non-believer, or if you're somebody who's kind of, checking church out, or if you're just visiting, or if your wife made you come, however that works, what I want to tell you is that is partially true in the sense of we believe that when people give to something that is bigger than themselves, that we could do more. And so for anybody out there who asks questions like I do, like, well, where does my money go? I'll let you know that part of it goes to our local campus, part of it goes to our local outreach. A significant part of it does that. And so when you do that, you're actually helping people all over our area experience a better life, which is an incredible thing. And then a lot of you may or may not know this, but when you give globally as well. And so we're able to reach, now this number is always staggering to me, but over 500,000 people all over the world are affected by your giving. People just like you who give consistently. We are able to be able to reach out to over 500,000 people all over the world with different kinds of projects, like Hope Water Project, where we bring clean water to parts of Africa that does not have it. But the personal one that I talk about a lot is what we do in Nepal, when we're able to bring young girls who are part of sex trafficking out of sex trafficking, and then be able to put them on a path to be able to get a job and sustain themselves. And I would just say for you, it's just amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so to you, I always get a little bit emotional. And so when people go, church just wants my money, I'm like, well, yeah, because we do some amazing things. And so that's not really just what we want, but I would just say to those of you who give, thank you so much for being a part of something that's so much bigger than yourself. The other thing I wanted to let you know about today is part of being a part of this place, if you call Kensington home, is we do the giving thing. But the other part is volunteering and being a part of things that are beyond you in terms of giving your time. And so I wanted to let you know about a movement that we are a part of here in our community. It's called Celebrate Recovery. And so if you're unfamiliar with Celebrate Recovery, what Celebrate Recovery seeks to do is bring people who find, we say like hurts, hang-ups, those kinds of things, or addiction, those kinds of things that are going on in their life. And we're working on creating a thing where we can bring those people together to experience hope and healing. And that really only happens through volunteers who are part of that. And so Craig Lang is one of our people that's on staff. He's over all of our groups and that sort of thing. And so he's actually spearheaded this, and I love this. Craig actually, in some ways on his own, Craig and Jamie was also part of this, rallied a group of of people, a group of churches together and say, what would happen if we all came together and we did this ministry together? And so we've got one church that's going to house it, which we're super excited about. I think we've got about 8 churches in the area that are jumping on board. But what we would ask you to do is to consider being a part of that ministry, right? So if there's something in you that says, I really would like to help people, if you have like that part of your heart where like, I really want to reach out and you are, you want to be a part of people that are struggling through that, or if you, and this is a big one, if you've ever walked that road on your own and you've come to the other side of it and you've found hope and healing, right? If you've ever walked that road, what we'd love to do is invite you to be a part of this. And so to get more information, I'll tell you again at the end of service, you can go to Starting Point right out in the lobby, and Craig will be out there. He would love to meet with you and give you some more information about that ministry. So again, today we are continuing our series, Learning to Fly. We're about to jump into that, but to get our minds thinking in that direction, we have a quick video to kind of get you thinking about what we're going to be talking about today. So let's watch this video together.
Can I help you? All right, checking any bags today?
No. Well, this is a carry-on.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't believe that will fit in the overhead.
I told you I wouldn't fit. You're so dumb.
Quiet.
We'd be happy to check the bag for you.
This one time, she shoplifted a sweater from the Gap and she lied to her parents about it.
I don't see how this is important right now.
Why don't you put the bag on the scale?
And in college, she plagiarized her final paper in her poli-sci class.
Oh, this is so unnecessary.
Really, ma'am, we'd be happy to check this bag for you.
And last week, after work, she met a guy at the bar, and let me tell you.
Okay, that's enough.
I'm just saying, you were really something.
You know what? Forget it. Looks like flying isn't gonna happen today.
She's a really, really bad person.
Can I help you?
Yeah, I kind of want to clap when I see that too. And the reason I want to clap is because when I see that video, I think about myself. Anybody else do that, right? So you have like this twin version of yourself that's kind of always sitting there looking at you, telling you sometimes all of the things that you have struggled with or done wrong, right? There's something inside of us that kind of feels that. Now, we've been talking about this idea of like flying, this idea of carrying baggage, and what does that mean, and what does that look like? And so when it came to this series, I'll tell you, it's kind of funny. We were sitting in a planning meeting months ago talking about this, talking about forgiveness, and somebody brought up this idea of what if we compared like forgiveness to like carry on baggage? And just a few weeks prior, I had been on a plane, me and Emily, and we have a 2-year-old. His name is Henry, and I had never flown really with a whole family before. Do you know what I'm talking about? Anybody else, like you've flown with like a toddler? Anybody ever done that? Yeah? Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and you're like, I just wish they would have served more stuff on the plane, right? There's just a little bit craziness, and so we're getting ready to get on the plane, and when we get to the airport, my wife, she's got Henry. We're trying to navigate him. We're trying to navigate the bags. We're trying to navigate his bags. We're trying to navigate a stroller and a car seat all at the same time. And so I'll never forget walking through the airport, and we're carrying all of this stuff, and there was a moment, I don't know if dads, you probably felt this, there was a moment where I just felt overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that I was carrying. Does anybody else, So at that point, now Emily's carrying Henry, and I didn't want her to carry the package because I'm trying to, be a man, like I'll carry it all. And so I'm carrying all this stuff. I've got the bag kind of going behind me. I've got the car seat in one hand. I've got my laptop bag. I've got on 2 different backpacks, my backpack, and then Henry's, what we carry all of his stuff in. And so I've got all this stuff, and I'm walking. Now, you'll appreciate this. And I locked eyes with another dad who was doing the same thing. You ever done this? And you don't say anything in that moment, right? You don't say anything. All you both do is you just kind of have this like defeated look on your face, and you're just like, what's up, And we locked eyes, and we did that, and I thought to myself, I'm not the only one who carries an enormous amount of baggage, and that's both true in an airport, but that's also true in our lives, right? If you're here, no matter what you believe about God, no matter what you believe about faith, no matter what you believe about life, no matter how old you are, the thing that unites every single person in this room is that we oftentimes carry around baggage when it comes to relationships. And more times than not, that baggage is related to and or connected to a moment where somebody hurt us. And so last week we talked about what it looks like to be able to forgive other people. And Andrew Kim spoke. He did an amazing, amazing job. I loved his talk. And at the end of the verse that he looked at, I wanted to revisit this. He talks about a verse that I thought was so powerful because I grew up reading this verse in the wrong way and being taught this verse in the wrong way. So here's the verse that we kind of ended with last week. We said this. Paul is talking about what it looks like to love other people, especially those people who have hurt you. And he says, on the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. And if he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, now this is the part that, my grandmother would get all excited about. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, right? Now, I love this part because for me, Paul spends about, 3 or 4 or 5 paragraphs talking about what it looks like to, if you're offended, love the other person. If you're upset at them, love the other person, love the other person, love the other person. And then for me, when I was taught this, you read all of that and you get to this one verse where it seems like you finally get satisfaction in getting back at them. You know what I mean? Like you finally get that, but you have to do it in a passive-aggressive way, right? But you finally do get back at them. And so as we were reading the passage and reading this with our team and talking to people, we discovered, and for me, I'd read this a lot, and then finally kind of looked at this and discovered that that's not the goal, right? And this is where we're going to launch from this week. The goal isn't to get back at somebody. The goal is completely different. In fact, the goal of this particular verse lines up so much with what he had already said up to this point. Now, the statement that I want to give you is extraordinarily cheesy. I know it's cheesy. It's super cheesy. And then we're going to read it together, and then we'll launch from there. But I just want you to remember it. And so we made it about as cheesy as any love song that you could ever think about. So here is the statement. The goal of the coal, is the heart of the enemy, not the satisfaction of the offended. Can we read that together, right? The goal of is the enemy, and not the satisfaction of the offended, right? Now, I love this, which means that verse, when you take it into context, it was actually a reference to something that was written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before. It was referencing something that would happen hundreds of years before that in this ancient Egyptian culture, where actually heaping burning coal on someone else's head is actually a positive and good thing. Now, the problem with this verse is that it makes me really frustrated, right? The problem with this verse is there's something inside of me that wants to get back at and receive satisfaction from someone else. The starting point with forgiveness is that we aren't trying to get back at. We aren't trying to find that satisfaction of. Forgiveness and releasing the baggage actually comes down to 2 things. It comes down to remembering what was done and releasing it. Remembering what they did to you, because you're not going to forget that in some ways. But even so, releasing them of that debt. So Paul ends this passage and he says this, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And so to do that when it comes to forgiveness essentially cancels a debt the other person can never repay anyway. Now I wanted to recap that because in part, what we're going to talk about today isn't necessarily focused on the other people that have hurt you. Because for a lot of people in the room, we've experienced what that feels like. We know what that is. Some of us, we have somebody that is like a recurring hurt for you, right? It's kind of like the bills that you pay online. It's coming every 3rd week of the month. Like you just know that something's going to happen. There's going to be another explosive incident. And we have to figure out how do we continue to forgive them. But for some of us, it's not somebody else. For a lot of us in the room, what we really carry and what really goes and kind of makes its way into our relational baggage isn't another person that we need to forgive. It's us. And so the question for us that we're going to talk about today is how do you forgive if the person that you need to forgive is you? Like how do you forgive somebody except the somebody is your body? Like how do you forgive yourself for the things that you did to that person in college? How do you forgive yourself for the things that you said to your spouse a long time ago? How do you forgive yourself for that big, massive, season of life where your decision-making not only hurt you, but it hurt other people? How do you forgive yourself for choosing a path or a direction early on that sent you in a direction that is affecting you into your 20s and 30s and 40s and 60s and 70s? How do you forgive yourself if you hurt your kids and now they're left the house and there's brokenness in the relationship? How do you forgive yourself when you find those moments? And the problem is, at least for me, I've heard versions of this where it's just like, well, just do it, The problem is, and this is what I love about that video, is that it seems like that is always a reminder, that there's always a reminder for us about what we did. That you didn't just forget the things that you did in the past. You didn't just forget the small mistakes that kind of led you. You didn't just forget the missteps that you had in your company that it seems like has created a lid for you to move up. You didn't forget. You're constantly reminded of those things because the baggage never fully goes away. But sometimes it becomes extraordinarily apparent. For some of us, it comes apparent whenever we find ourselves in silence, Like you don't like noise, and part of you, some of you are really funny, like you're naturally funny, you're sarcastic, you've got a thing. And deep down, though, that's just a way of creating noise in the silence so you don't have to sit with what's actually going on. Some of you, when it comes to this, the silence just reveals your own insecurity and your own weaknesses. And you avoid that because the silence is actually illuminating your guilt, shame, and fear. For some of you, you wouldn't say this out loud, but you wish that you fell asleep quicker than your wife did or your husband does, right? Because once they fall asleep, now you just got to watch Seinfeld all night long or until you get tired enough to fall asleep, because when it's silent, you're not having a conversation. You're left with who you really are. Some of you, this becomes really apparent when you look in the mirror, right? Every time you look in the mirror, right, you probably wouldn't say this out loud to anybody, but what you see is what you could have been, and then you have this reflection of who you actually are. And who you actually are, you're just not proud of. For some of you, it's like the way that you look kind of thing. For some of you, it's you're reminded of your past. For some of you, every time you walk, and I love this. This is me, and this is so vain. This is so terrible. When I walk in to Target or Walmart or there should be a cooler shop. What's a cooler shop than that? Starbucks. That's so much better. Or Brew. Anyway, I walk in, I walk past the cars. Have you ever been startled by the look of yourself in the windows of somebody? Like you're walking, you're like, what's up? Like that. Like you feel that. And what you see when you see yourself in the mirror when you're walking into Starbucks, not Walmart, is what you feel is like angst because you're not satisfied with you. And I'm not satisfied with me. Now, my favorite, and I wanted to show you this picture because I think it kind of outlines the beautiful part of it. Some of you feel this when you see that person. You know what I mean? Any Office fans out there? Like, I love this with Dwight and Jim, right? There's constant tension throughout the entire episode because Jim is that person to Dwight. And not only is he that person, but he does the pranks and he jokes around. Some of you, whenever you go to work, you see someone else in the company who made decisions that you wish you would have made. And they got elevated. Now they're your boss. And you're like, I'm never submitting them. I'm not going to say it out loud, but I'm never in my heart going to submit to them because, and it's not even a them thing. It's a you thing. You regret the decisions you made and the way that they moved through the company. And what you're left with is this extraordinary guilt. For some of you, this is an ex, right? This is your ex-boyfriend, your ex-husband, your ex-wife, whatever that is. And you see them, and you think about the things that you did that led to your marriage ending or your relationship ending, and it seems like they're so happy. And every time you see that person, you don't just hate them. You hate you. And your identity gets so wrapped up into that. And here's another one, and this is a tough one. Some of you feel this whenever you take a spiritual step. Now, I love this when it comes to the songs that we sang today. Because the idea of God being faithful and God being good and those kinds of things, some of you distance yourself from that, not because of God. Because in your heart, if you were to think about this distance and this next step, it's hard for you to process through. Because you don't feel worthy, even if he's up there, because of your past, that a God could love you and forgive you of what you've done. Now, there's this great quote from one of my friends who lives in Detroit. He's actually the creative genius behind this series. His name is Mike Nelson. And Mike has this way of talking about this that I think is so beautiful. He said, it's like you're living in your own courtroom. And not only are you living in your own courtroom, but you are the defendant, you're the prosecutor, you're the jury, and you're the judge, all at the same time. And if you were really honest, and if I was really honest, we feel so much angst and disappointment and brokenness because of who we are, who we've become, and what we've done in the past. So, how do you forgive? And the person that you need to forgive is you. So, what we're going to do is we're going to look at one of these passages that's found in the Bible that if you read it at first glance, I'm going to be honest with you, it feels like a bunch of jargon, right? It feels like that's just spiritual language all over. I don't even know what that means. You know, I remember being in school and taking a class specifically on this letter that Paul wrote to Romans, and we got to this section, and I remember sitting in class like this. My friend was nudging me, you got to wake up, because I just was not fully engaged. And the reason I wasn't fully engaged is because he's just so thick in the words that he uses to describe both us and God. But the words he uses are so powerful and they're so foundational, not only for you being able to navigate you now, but being able to navigate you in light of who God is. And so if you're unfamiliar with Paul, if you're unfamiliar with parts of the Bible, Paul is an interesting character, and he's not writing from a place of better than, right? Sometimes you read through it and you're like, well, of course, you were Jesus' brother. You know, you should have thought that, you know. But you get to this part with Paul. Paul, actually, before he became a follower of Jesus, was a guy who was pursuing people who were followers of the way or followers of Jesus, and a part of their execution, right? He was sending people out to persecute people who were followers of the way or followers in this early church mentality. And he has this verse even just a little bit before what we're going to read today, and he says this. He says, although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. And he says this, for in my inner being I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me, and I don't miss this, a prisoner of the law of sin that's at work in me. The man who wrote about half of the New Testament felt that. And I would say to you today, as we look at his words, it's his vulnerability that would lay the foundation for him to be able to say the words that he pens in this letter to this group of people that has lasted thousands of years. So here's what Paul says. Romans chapter 8. He says, therefore, there is, can we say this together? No. Now, we're, 2018 in the Western world, we don't think about this, because even if somebody condemns you, you're just like, no, I'm good. You don't even think about it. If you don't like it, you just push back on authority. Paul makes a couple of assumptions, that there is an authority, and that there is a standard, and that there is this emotion or feeling of us not being able to rise to it. And he starts out with this truth, that therefore there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. That right out the gate, what he's saying is that there is a separation because of your behavior, because of my behavior, because of sin that is in you and sin that is in me. There's a separation between us and God. And he's saying, therefore, there is no condemnation, just so you know, for those who are in Christ Jesus or have decided to follow him. Which, and you read this, the question that we immediately would ask, and the question that, people who are reading this would immediately ask is, wait a minute, how? How is there no condemnation for me? Because I know in me I haven't been able to solve this. I know in me I haven't even forgiven myself. So how are you going to tell me that someone else, the God of the universe and his perfection, has, in fact, forgiven me? It says, therefore, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, because through Christ Jesus, the law of the Spirit, we'll talk about that, who gives life, has set you, what's that word? I love this, has set you free. That you're not the prisoner that Paul was talking about earlier on. That you don't have to be trapped as a prisoner in your mind from what? Your sin has created in me, has set you free from the law of sin and death. Now, this law of the Spirit is this way of thinking about resurrection, where there is freedom not based off of what you've done, but freedom based off of what Jesus did for you. Paul is saying that Christ is stronger than your greatest sin. Christ is stronger than your greatest mistake. Christ is stronger than your divorce. Christ is stronger than the ways that you've hurt your kids. Christ is stronger. And through Christ and Christ alone, there is freedom and liberation. And he goes on and he says, for what the law was powerless to do because it was weakened by the flesh. In the sense of you had a list of things that you were trying to live up to. But because you were human, you didn't. Come on, even if you're not a follower of Jesus, you don't even live up to your own standards, do you? How many of you, by the time February hits, those goals are gone, Every January 1st, I'm like, I've got a weight plan, I've got a health plan, and I'm still paying at times for gym memberships. When we lived in Atlanta, I remember paying for a gym membership for, this is terrible to say out loud, for 2 years. I went twice. I was like, that was a very expensive workout that I did for 7 minutes. That was a very expensive workout. You don't even live up to your own standards when it comes to working out. When Paul's going to say this word flesh over and over again, which I hate the word flesh, but I want you to think humanity when he says that. You couldn't keep the law because you were why? Human. And Christ, in full humanity and also being God, did what you cannot do for yourself. Weakened by the flesh. God did by sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh to be the sin offering on behalf of you. And so he condemned sin in the flesh in order that the righteous requirement of the law, this is where it gets kind of wordy, but so good. Righteous requirement of the law might be fully met in us who did not live according to the flesh. Jesus, in human form, didn't live just in our own humanity like you do. He overcame that and was in fact perfect, but according to the Spirit. Now he's writing to a group of people who would have in some ways known and understood what his claim was. That Jesus died, was killed, and then he rose from the grave. They're like, how do we know? I mean, even like 2018, rising from the grave, I want to know. How do we know, Paul? Because there were eyewitnesses to that. There were people who were there. And as we said this in the Demystify series, if you're a skeptic, I would love for you to go. KensingtonChurch.org/watch, find Demystify. And we talk about this in depth. But there were people who saw it happen and then saw him after he was dead. They're like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be... Like his closest followers, even though he predicted his death and resurrection, they weren't sitting around going, this is going to be great. No one was there waiting. Paul says, died and he rose from the grave. Fully human, fully God. Boom, there you go. And he did it for you. Law was powerless to provide you the freedom that you crave. Freedom is only found in Jesus. Then he says this, those who live according to the flesh, those who have adopted a mindset that I am locked in this prison of my own humanity, have their mind set on what the flesh desires. But those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their minds on what the Spirit desires. That the mindset has shifted not just toward my own brokenness, but towards his resurrection. The mind governed by the flesh is death. Right? Now, it's not just that death. Death, and I love this, the parallel is death to body, mind, spirit, soul. It's a path of death. But the path of Jesus is resurrection. He makes this parallel. It's not just that you're going to feel bad about yourself, but you're on a path of destruction for your life until you decide not only to pray a prayer, but to adopt the mindset of Christ and the freedom that he gives. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. As long as you live in your own brokenness and decide to stay there, you can't follow God's best for your life. In fact, he takes it one step further. Those who are in the realm of the flesh cannot please God. I love this. The idea of pleasing someone else is something I think in our culture we just resist so heavily. I hope I can say this. One time I said to my wife, I said, this is a terrible moment. It's a terrible moment. We got a big fight, and she goes, what's wrong with you? And this is terrible. The more emotional the conversation gets, the less emotional I get. Any other guys like that in the room? I want to be, but I'm just I turn into Zorro with my work. It's just not good, And I said, well, at the end of the day, I'm just disappointed. And what happened to her face in that moment was just I'm so sorry. Because there's something inside of us that it's not that we just want to do the right thing. For people that we love, people that we're in a relationship with, we want to please them. The idea that you could disappoint God is one that we don't talk about a lot, but it is in fact true. That he loves you enough to say, you are mine and I am fully pursuing you, and grace is yours and freedom is yours and the way to live is yours. But that I might live my life in a way that doesn't please God by choosing to live in the flesh. Choosing to live only in the brokenness of my own humanity and not saying that there is a different way to terms of following Jesus. And the beauty of this is that it's not up to you. It's not up to me. You can't make yourself good enough to be worthy of forgiveness. I can't make myself good enough to be worthy of forgiveness. Brokenness is brokenness. But Jesus overcame all of that on your behalf. And Paul flips it. He says, you, who? You reading this letter. Who is that? All of you, however, are not in the realm of the flesh. As a follower of Jesus, you're not living in that space, but are in the realm of the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of God lives in you. And if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, they do not belong to Christ. And then he says this, but if Christ is in you, then even though, and I love this, anytime you see like that sort of thing, even though your body is subject to death, even though that you're naturally in some ways on a mortal path because of sin, the Spirit gives life because of righteousness. Now, I don't want you to miss this next part because it's one of my favorite parts in the entire Bible. I want to plaster it on everybody's house, you know. That would be really weird, but okay. And if the Spirit of him, being God, who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you. It's like, whoa, wait, time out. Raising from the dead. That would be fun. Think about that for a second. Paul is saying that the same Spirit of God that brought life to Jesus' dead body, the same power in the universe that brought hope and healing and resurrection, the same power in the early church that even in the amongst persecution, even in the amongst of them saying, that's your friend, oh, we're taking them away, they're going to be killed. Even in the midst of the early people who were followers of Jesus, watching people suffer and suffer and suffer, the same power that enabled them to move forward in the midst of persecution, the same power that allowed this whole thing to be brought together, the same power that breathes life into our universe is in you to give you freedom. The Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you. He who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of his Spirit who lives in you. The juxtaposition that Paul makes over and over and over again is the way that leads to destruction or the way that leads to resurrection. The way that leads to resurrection of all areas of your life. And the question that we seem to get from Paul is when will you take that resurrection? When will you not just say, I prayed a prayer when I was 6, you know, woo. But when you're alone in front of your computer at night, your spouse isn't there, and you decide death or resurrection, you choose what's already yours. Therefore, brothers and sisters, we have an obligation, but it is not to our brokenness, humanity, flesh, to live according to it. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if the Spirit you put to death the misdeeds of the body, you will live. That if you choose to adopt a different way of approaching your life, you will find freedom. And he continues on, he says this, for those who are led by the Spirit of God, I don't want you to miss this, are the children of God. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship, and by him we cry, Abba, Father. Now, I love this. Because the beautiful part about grace and the truth, and what separates Christianity from all of this, is that Paul sets up a God who set a standard that we didn't meet. And then a God who loves us so much that sent Jesus into the world to give us what we couldn't give ourselves. But not only that, the God of the universe could have looked at you and just said, you're my servant, you know? Which I feel like if, you know, I was doing that, I feel like, now they all bow to me, you know? God of the universe could have said, you are like my distant relative, like the weird, creepy uncle, you know? He could have said, you're in, but I want you to always know that you're not good enough. Always know that. He could have said that. But Paul ends this by saying, no. God says, come to me. as a father and a son. Come to me with the full privileges, not of a distance, but as my own. And I didn't understand what this meant, because I didn't grow up without a dad in the home. So I had Henry. And I remember it's so real, like when I first acknowledged that he said dada. You guys remember this? When your kid for the first time said daddy or dada, and it was like, and anything close to it counted, right? Like it could have just been like anything, but no, he said it, and we're good. And I have this video. I wish I had showed this video. He says it, and not only does he say it over and over and over and over again, he's smiling, And I think to myself, I think that's what that means. Because in his 100% vulnerability and dependence on me, right? In his 100%, I can't even change my own diaper, and I got to be fed, Mom, all that stuff. There's love and joy and dependence and da 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 da. Tim Keller, I love the way he talks about Abba Father. He talks about in the utterings of a child that we get to come to God as children of God. See, I think forgiving yourself isn't wrapped up in who you are. It's wrapped up in the God whose arms are wide open saying, come to me. You are mine. And Paul says, the Spirit himself testifies that with our spirit that we are God's children. Now the words in Greek are different for these two parts. Second time when Paul says it emphatically, what he's saying is that not only are you my child, but all of the benefits that come with that are mine. It's almost a way of saying you are my heir. And all is mine is yours. So if you're sitting here with the kind of past that we talked about earlier, if you're sitting here with the kind of brokenness that we talked about earlier, if you're sitting here with not even just a list, but a book of things that make you feel like you're not worthy. Whether you prayed a prayer when you were a kid or not, whether you've accepted Jesus as your Savior or not, whether you decide to place your hope and trust in Him or not, the beauty is that God is saying, come to me. That you're not going to be able to forgive yourself on your own. You're not going to be able to get past that on your own. Say it like this, that your capacity for self-forgiveness isn't found in you, but it's found in the God that lives in you. That your path to understanding that I'm beyond this isn't in saying now I'm worthy, because you're never going to feel worthy as long as you're looking at it for real. You can fake yourself out and diminish what you did, but that you're not actually worthy. You've just convinced yourself that it wasn't so bad, It's remembering what was done and releasing it through the power of Jesus. The path to self-forgiveness calls us to acknowledge not only who we are in our own brokenness, but whose we are. I used to hate, that sounds terrible to say out loud. I used to hate the terms like, you're a child of God, I heard that all the time as a kid. You're a child of God. I'm like, well, number one, I don't want to be a child. And then number two, that just feels like touchy-feely, the Notebook kind of sayings, that's what it felt like, a Hallmark card. But heir to the kingdom. Son of the maker of the universe, brought into that spirit that moves throughout our earth and power to bring redemption and resurrection to our lives. That's what we're called. So what we're going to do is, I want you to see a story of someone who I think probably did something the vast majority of us, not all of us, but the vast majority of us in the room will go, oh gosh, I would never do that, And I want you to see his road towards wrestling through this and finding what resurrection actually looks like in his life. Let's watch this video together.
The first thing I realized was my face hurt and my ankle hurt. I remember kind of just barely opening my eyes, and I was kind of panning the room. And that's when I realized that I was handcuffed to the hospital bed. Once I realized that, I started asking for a nurse. Instead of a nurse coming in, a police officer actually walked in. He told me that the night prior, I'd been driving my car. I was visually intoxicated, and he told me that I veered into the next lane and that I struck a vehicle. He finally told me that I had killed the person in the other vehicle. I actually didn't start drinking till I was in the 11th grade, so I was like 16, I think, 16, 17 years old. However, I instantly became an active alcoholic. I had a huge lack of self-confidence when I was in high school, and the moment I drank, I just felt that lifted. I felt like I could talk to anyone. I was someone who, within probably my second or third time drinking, I could drink 12 to 15 beers and be fine, not slurring my words, not stumbling. In probably a few months, I started drinking. I started smoking pot pretty frequently. I started popping pills. Like, I went from this, this kid who was scared to talk to anyone to instantly I was okay to go to a party and talk to people. One of the things that I remember most, especially in the 6 months prior to my sentencing, was waking up every day, and for a split 2 to 3 second window, I woke up and everything was normal because I didn't remember for that split second what situation I was in. And then everything would hit me because I had an alcohol tether on, so that'd be like the first sensation that I felt was there's something wrapped around my ankle. That led to me obviously remembering, I'm in this predicament, and I made this choice that I never thought the consequences could be so drastic. There were some really dark times in those first couple months where I quite honestly didn't want to be here anymore. I couldn't comprehend how anything that I did from that moment on was going to be good. I didn't understand how there's going to be any more positives in my life at that moment forward. I thought that I was irredeemable. The courtroom is a strange place. It's the place where you can't hide from anything. It's a physical embodiment of what had happened. It's like you're here because of that, and it just hits you so hard. They call me up to the stand. I was weeping at this moment. And then the attorney for the family stepped up and read a letter from this family who is not present in the courtroom. They live in Bosnia, so they couldn't be present. But they wrote this letter that essentially stated that they forgave me for what I did, and that they didn't want me to do any jail time. Yeah, that's a moment that I will never forget. It's the moment that I can attribute from going from being an agnostic to being a believer in Jesus Christ, because I knew at that point that something had been working in their life to be able to forgive me in 6 months for what had happened. I was nowhere near forgiving myself. I didn't think that another person could forgive me. I didn't think my parents could forgive me. I didn't think friends and family could forgive me. At that point, I didn't think that even if there was a God, that He would forgive me. But this family forgiving me, it still, to me, is the most miraculous thing that's happened in my life. After this letter was read in the courtroom, my judge, Mary Tranowski, people also call her Scary Mary, and it's ironic because the reason why she's called Scary Mary is because of her toughness on drunk driving offenses. She basically gave a speech, in a way, to the courtroom, stating that in her, I think she said, 25 years of being a judge, she had never heard such compassion from a family for someone and not want maximum jail time. She couldn't, in her own mind, in her own heart, not give me any jail time like the family had asked, but that she was going to drop it down to a year in jail, which actually equates to 10 months in jail. On top of that, I was given 5 years of probation, which I still have 19 months to serve as of today. It wasn't until I was actually in a transport van on the way to the jail that it kind of all crashed down on me, and I had a smile on my face, and I'm pretty sure I was the only person with a smile on their face in a transport van going to jail. It was this really intense moment of just like pure elation and the most bizarre place to have it. I mean, you're handcuffed to the people next to you, so I'm sitting there like this with just a smile on my face because I know that my life was going to be better at that moment. It was this moment of freedom, knowing that the people that I knew I hurt most actually forgave me, and also that the God that I didn't know if he was there or not, I knew that he was. And I knew that at that point he was going to work in my life because he had worked in their life. Once I actually started thinking about forgiveness and just kind of what that means, I really started thinking about the family's forgiveness and God's forgiveness. If they forgave me and if God forgave me, then who am I not to forgive myself? I knew that by not forgiving myself, I was holding myself back from being able to utilize the story to help people. It took a lot of therapy. It took a lot of going to AA meetings. It took a lot of just talking about it quite a bit to get comfortable enough to discuss it with myself and to discuss it with God about what does forgiving myself even look like? If you would have asked me when I was the man laying in that hospital bed, handcuffed with the deputy in the room, if I thought that my life was gonna ever be okay or somehow better than it was, the night prior, I would have thought you lost your mind. And it's just a testament to what can happen when you let God into your life. I feel guilty for what happened. I will always feel guilty, but I will never let that hold me back in life again, because if I do, then I'm not using it for what God wants me to use it for. I mean, that's the thing about God. There's a lot of things that he does that we can't comprehend. And it's just, it's amazing. I mean, there's just really no other way of putting it.
This isn't, I don't think this is everybody in the room, but there are some of you, when you listen to that story, the weight of the guilt and the shame that you feel is so heavy. Again, this isn't everybody, but there are some of you in the room where you hear his story, and it's not even fully there, but it's there's just like a small crack open, like in the window, of hope. That you don't have to lay there at night watching the fan, reliving it all again. When you see that person, that there might actually be a way for you to genuinely, not just fake it, but genuinely care for and love them. And that you might be able to move past your own brokenness. And the reason that it's cracked is because you've spent months or years or decades, for some of you, telling yourself a narrative that you're not enough and that you can't do it, and that you're not worthy. And I want to tell you, I agree. Neither am I. Neither is anybody in this room. And this is the power of the gospel. That your path towards self-forgiveness isn't found in you. And the beauty of hope and the beauty of grace is that it's only found in Jesus. That the power for us to forgive ourselves begins with the decision to receive from ourselves, for ourselves, the gift that comes from Christ. To receive his grace and redemption, and to receive what's already waiting on us. And that's the freedom to be able to move forward in light of all that we've done. And so for us today, as we wrap up our time together, what I want to do is I like to give you 4 or 5 steps or 3 steps to walk out of here and well, now I can those are my favorite. I love doing that, The problem with that is this one isn't a 3 or 4 step thing. Because if it were 3 or 4 steps, you already found the steps and you had already done the steps and you would have already been stepped out. Now you're on a different floor altogether. You're all good, This is deciding who you're going to be. This is deciding one path or another path. This is setting yourself on a course that when you're tempted to go over here, that you recorrect and you kind of autocorrect towards what actually should be. And there's not a step for that. There's not a prescription for that. There's not a thing. When Paul talks about it, he spends an entire chapter almost telling you who you are, not necessarily what all to do. So what I wanted you to do today, the band's going to come out. They're going to sing a song in a second. What I want you to do today is I want you to remind yourself, it's going to sound odd, to remind yourself of whatever that one thing is that's the biggest thing. And then I just want you to say this in your mind. I want you to say, but I am a child of God. And for some of you, that's too feeling, that's okay. So maybe you say, this is what I say, that I am an heir to the king, And some of you are well, that's so self-helpy, whatever that is. Maybe. But if you haven't done it, then you don't know. So try it. So when you're tempted to put on the hat or the thought process or the path where it's saying unforgiveness, my brokenness, what if you just chose the law of the Spirit that Paul talks about? Saying, but all of that is true. But I am a child of God. And with that comes the capacity to live as he's called me to live, and to be free in the way that he's called me to be free. And here's what I know, and I know this for me. The more you retrain your mind to think in that direction, the more you allow yourself to experience that, the more you will remind yourself of who you are, and it'll completely change your life. So I'm going to ask you to stand up, and we're going to sing this song. I'm going to invite the band to come out. I want to pray for us. And as we sing this next song, I want you to do kind of what I said. Maybe remind yourself whatever that biggest thing is, and then remind yourself that you're a child of God. There's a part in this next song that I love, and when we sing it, for those of us who are followers of Jesus, if you know the song, even if you're a bad singer, do we have any bad singers other than me in the room, right? Bad singers unite, right? I'm going to ask you to sing this out loud, and your wife's going to be like, would you shut up? But just do it anyway. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. And the reason I'm asking you to sing this loud, and the reason is because when we get to this part, it's a reminder of the lengths that God went so that you could know who you are. And the lengths that God would go for that you could understand and receive the grace and forgiveness that he's given us. So remind yourself, I'm a child of God. And the part of the song says, you split the sea so I could walk right through it. All right, once we get to that part, we start proclaiming together what God's done on our behalf. My hope is that we both sing for ourselves and sing for the other people in this room. So let me pray for us. Father, we thank you for this truth, and we thank you that even though we are yet sinners, even though we are broken, even though we are a group of people who have done some really awful things, even though it seems like freedom doesn't find itself to us, maybe other people, but not us. God, I ask that you would remind us so deeply today that we're yours. You would remind us so deeply today of what you've done for us. And for those of us in the room who are kind of adverse to the thought of being a child of God or an heir to the privileges that come from you, God, I pray that you would break that in us. And we would be reminded of your goodness and your grace. And we would be reminded of who you have said that we are. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. Sing this out. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. Sing it out. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Yes, I am. I am surrounded by the arms of the Father. I am surrounded by songs of deliverance. We've been liberated. Come on. From our bondage, we're the sons and the daughters. Let us sing our freedom. we sing this out. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. 'Cause I am a child of God. One more time. I'm no longer a slave to fear. 'Cause I am a child of God.
So today, may you be reminded of that truth. No matter what you've done, no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're going to do today, that you are a child of God, and that you are an heir to the greatest kingdom you and I could ever imagine. And that's his kingdom. So today, as you leave, here's what I'm going to ask you to do as you kind of wrap up, and we're going to leave here together. You're going to get in the car. You're going to go grab lunch wherever you're going to go grab lunch. It's going to be so good. You know, it's going to be great. You're going to hang out. You're going to talk, and then you're going to forget emotionally kind of what's happened here. You know, at some point you will. You're going to be watching TV tonight, whatever your TV show is. You're Netflixing, and it's like 9:30. And then you're going to find yourself again in whatever that moment is or whatever that trigger is for you. Maybe it's silence, maybe it's seeing the person, whatever those things are for you. And in that moment, you're going to need a reminder. So here's what I ask you to do. Some of you, you're going to write it on a card. You need to do that. Some of you need to put it on your phone so that you see that. For some of you, you need just to look at your wife and say, I just need you to tell me. You just remind me, you know, your husband, whatever that is. And some of you need a friend. Some of you need an accountability person that's going to tell you this over and over again. Whoever that is for you, I'm going to ask that once the emotions are gone, that you find whatever that reminder is for you, because that part of it is extraordinarily practical in your life. Last thing I want to say, and then we're going to let you go, is I know we talked about Celebrate Recovery today, and for some of you in the room, we talked about getting leaders for this, and I would love for you to be a leader if you're interested in that. Again, it's right out at starting point. For some of you in the room, what we talked about today is actually tied to an addiction that you have, right? Some of you, what we talked about today, like it cuts through all of the behavioral stuff that you're doing, and it cuts through who you are. And so what I'm going to ask you today, I'm going to ask you to take a really brave step. If you're a person that's like, you know, I would love to be a part of that, or I need to be a part of that, or someone's telling me that I need to be a part of that, one of the most courageous things that you could do today is to tell somebody that. And so what I'm going to ask you to do on your way out, if that's you, you know, obviously if you're interested in signing up and being a leader, we want you to do that. But if that's you and you just need help, today I'm going to ask you to go to Starting Point as well. There'll be a guy there, his name is Craig. Craig is like the best guy in the whole world. I think he might be, like there's Jesus, and then there's Craig, somewhere around here. Yeah, he's great. He's like a grandpa. He really is that. He's an amazing guy. I would love for you to just grab him and be like, hey, you don't even have to say much. He's like, I'm the guy that Patrick was talking about. That's all you got to say. I'm the guy Patrick was talking about. I'm the girl, lady, woman. I don't know the word. Anyway, whatever. I'm the female guy, you know, Patrick was talking about. And I would like to be a part. So just do that. And then I want to let you know, next week we're getting a brand new series called Kensington at the Movies, right? So we're going to be doing a different style of messages. We're going to get to see movie clips as you go through, which will be fun. So we'd love for you to come back. This is also a great series to bring people to. I know we say that every time, but this certainly is. Next week we're talking about Star Wars. What? So, and if you're not a Star Wars fan, who cares? Come on anyway. I'm not either. So it'd be great. So kidding. So come on. We'd love for you to be a part of that. Excuse me, Kensington at the Movies next week. Again, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you right back here next Sunday. We'll see you soon. Thanks. Thank you so much for watching online. We're so glad you decided to be a part of the service today. And if you're watching and you're like curious about a next step for you, I know we talked about Celebrate Recovery, but we would love for you to get connected with that as well. If you're in the Metro Detroit area, we have a Celebrate Recovery there. We actually are in Orlando as well. So if you're watching, in the Florida area, we'd love for you to connect with them. But whatever your next step is, we're going to ask you to take that. You can find out all the details about how to take that with us on kensingtonchurch.org. You can get all those details there, or you can follow us on social media. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Those are great ways to discover more about us and all that's going on here. And again, next week, we'll be kicking off a brand new series that we would love to invite you back to. You can join us at either 9 or 11 right there. Again, thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you soon.